Hello and welcome to Byju's IAS. Let's get started and look into the first article. The first article says strengthening public health capacities in disaster. India as a country faces both natural and man-made disaster. Up until 2005, our approach towards disaster management was ad hoc and reactive in nature. What do we mean by it? Let's say, for example, there is a man made disaster or it can be a natural disaster. So, whenever a disaster strikes that particular region, our approach towards that disaster was ad hoc in nature. We did not have pre plans, we did not have rules and regulations, we did not have who has to take the responsibility for it, who will be the first responders, how this issue has to be solved. So whatever comes our way, that issue was solved on a particular basis. So we did not have prescribed rules and regulations when it comes to the disaster management. But after 2005, we came up with what is called as the proactive approach. So the reactive approach became what is called as the proactive approach, which means even before a reaction or a disaster strikes that particular region or a particular place, we would already have laws in place and who would take the responsibility for it. So up until 2005, we had a reactive approach or an ad hoc process, and after 2005, we came up with what is called as the Disaster Management Act of the year 2005, which happens to be a proactive approach. So what was this proactive approach? Basically, we did come up with the Disaster Management Act. What was the importance of this proactive approach? With this proactive approach, we have a clear cut structure that was laid by the government. So what exactly happens? We have the Disaster Management Act, which says what are the responsibilities of the central government, which lays what are the responsibilities of the state government, and it also looks at who takes the responsibility when it happens at a particular region at the local level as well. So clear cut demarcation and rules and regulations was laid about the structure and the functioning as well. The act further laid rules for the precautions, the mitigations, steps that have to be taken before a particular disaster strikes and after a particular reaction or a disaster strikes, and what should be the response when it comes to the responders. So these rules and regulations with respect to the Disaster Management Act became a proactive approach because of the establishment of the Disaster Management Act. As this was being enforced, it also became a part of the developmental process. So what do we mean by this developmental process? Let's say, for example, when you look at the traditional approach to development, what was being laid was the importance being given only to the development, but the scenario of disaster was not taken a part of the development. So what meant important was the economics, what meant important was the growth, what meant important was the jobs that was created and the regional imbalances getting changed as well. So in this particular backdrop, when developmental projects were taken up, there was certain issues that disaster might strike that particular region. But what happened with the establishment of the Disaster Management Act? Disaster as a condition also became a part of development. Let's say, for example, if there is a particular project that is coming from, is there a disaster that can strike in that particular region 5 years or 10 years down the lane was what was also looked into. Let's say there is a hydroelectricity project or there is a mining project. Yes, it is a developmental project, but there can be disasters as well. There can be flooding in that particular region as well. This was also being considered as part of the developmental progress. So the Disaster Management Act also brought in an idea that development and disaster are equal to each other. Only development at the cost of disaster should not be taken up. This has to be synonymous, says the Disaster Management Act. So a development and disaster will go hand in hand in case we ignore the fact that development at the cost of disaster, this can strike hugely both on the economic terms and also in terms of lives as well. So the Disaster Management Act also became a very important prospect when it comes to the developmental activities. This is not all. After the year 2005, we may have made huge progress. When we look at 2005 and when we look at 2020, yes, we have couple of laws, we have laid number of rules and regulations, we have had mitigation techniques as well. But the problem is there are still existing gaps when it comes to the disaster management as well, and that is in specific focus to the medical preparedness. We have made the progress, we have improved a lot, but still there are issues when it comes to disaster handling for the medical issues. One simple example is the COVID-19. What exactly happened? We have all seen it. We have the government which is trying to do its best, but since we did not have a legislation in picture, what was being used is the Disaster Management Act to bring an end to COVID-19, and it was this legislation that was being used by the government to keep a check on the COVID-19. But in spite of this particular law being used, there are critical gaps that are present in the medical infrastructure. So what is that we have to understand? So going forward, in case we have to reduce the disaster issues when it comes to the medical preparedness, what we require is certain structure. So in order to lay this structure, we also have to look at the lacunae areas. We have to look at the deficiencies. Only when we know the shortcomings, only when we know what are the gray areas, that is when we would be able to address the medical preparedness issue. What are the lacunae currently? When we look at the Disaster Management Act, this particular act does not comprehensively cover anything about the medical preparedness. So what we require is one holistic law only addressing the medical part of it. So this Disaster Management Act was not meant for the medical preparedness. This was meant for something else. So what we require right now is a holistic law which is looking into the medical approach, and what we require henceforth is an objective law created by the parliament which is meant only for the medical terms. Apart from this objective law for the medical preparedness, what we also require is the public health system. Why public health system is a necessity is what we need to ponder. When you look at the private systems, we already have the existence of the private system, which is the private healthcare providers, but these healthcare providers are not able to match up to all the requirements that which is required for India. Let us take some of the examples as given under this article. When you consider the private hospitals, they are usually averse to the infectious diseases. Let's take for example the COVID itself. Majority of these private hospitals were not ready to entertain the COVID patients initially, but it was the public hospitals which were taking up all these individuals who were affected by COVID. Why? Because their only motive is about profit making. So when profit making is their motto, when profit making is their agenda, they focus more on other health issues like heart problems or the kidney issues, which might not impact their profits, and this will also not impact their infrastructural support as well. So when it comes to the private players, they are more into profit making and they are averse to affect infectious disease, and that is because their profits may comparatively be reduced. Now, let's say for example, after a couple of days, the private hospitals did also start accepting the COVID-19 patients as well. But when you look at these hospitals, there was exorbitant prices, or the amount of money that was being paid by the patients to all these hospitals were comparatively more as well. So what the government does, it comes up with capping of the treatment prices as well. When such a capping was enforced in couple of states in India, regulated by the government rules, this again was not being checked as well. Government does come up with the rules, the government does come up with the regulations, but the monitoring and constant checking of this particular capping is again violated by these private players. And since we have a weak regulation, since the organizational setup of checking them is comparatively poor in India because of the corruption, because of the issues of directly engaging the red tape with these hospitals, what we have is these private hospitals are not able to keep up to all these issues of medical exigencies, because these private hospitals are not able to take upon the responsibility of an unknown public health emergency. What we require is the establishment of the public health system. So we have the existence of the public health system, but the Disaster Management Act speaks about having an emergency plan. But this emergency plan is still not updated for all these public health system. As a result, what we require is two important things. One is an objective law for the entire disaster management medical preparedness, and the other is the upgradation of the public health system, and what we require is a legal backing for the establishment of it. That is what this article speaks about in reference to the private hospitals. Now, when you look at the public hospitals in general, or public laws and the government initiatives, they have also been neglecting the pressing public health issues as well. Let's take for example the tuberculosis, or let's say for example the periodic dengue that comes in a particular region. If the government was serious enough, they would have already organized and come up with a law, but they have missing for an organic law and a comprehensive law, both for tuberculosis and those that can harm the general public as well. So the need of the hour to bring an end to all these disaster management preparedness is to come up and integrate these issues, these pictures, with what is called as the primary healthcare. So what is the issue here? Since we do not have a comprehensive law, since we do not have the public health systems meeting to the public health emergencies and exigencies, what we can do, at least for now, is to integrate this disaster management with the primary healthcare system that we have in India. Now the question is, what is this primary healthcare? When you look at the primary healthcare, this is the first level of contact where the patient has with the doctor. So what you have is the patient to doctor relationship at the very first level, and that is called as the primary healthcare. So these primary healthcare centers, their infrastructure will have to be developed. So in case of an emergency, the primary healthcare centers are able to take up all the load when it comes to the disaster with respect to a medical issue. So what exactly happens when it comes to the primary healthcare? They have multi-sectoral action, they have community engagement, they have disease surveillance, and they basically also have essential healthcare provision as well. So we must be able to integrate this disaster issue of a medical emergency with the primary healthcare system. So making primary healthcare central to the disaster management can also be a significant step towards building the health system and also community reliance to the disasters as well. So what is the way forward? The government will have to make sure that it does not rely holistically on the private sector, because the private sector is more about profit making. They are also averse to the infectious disease. It is the responsibility of the government to come up with a comprehensive law, lay the structure for the public health system, and make sure all these medical exigencies, emergencies are addressed by the government. And at the same time, for the transition to take place, for the parliament to come up with the law, we require a structure. So during this transition period, what we require is the primary healthcare becoming the part of the disaster management plan when it comes to medical exigencies, is what this article all about. It is this that we have to understand with reference to this article. Now let's look into the next article. This article says providing quick psychosocial support. When you look at the mental health, what do we mean by mental health? Peace internally and also with our thought process. When there are people who are disturbed mentally, this can also result in depression as well. This can also lead to committing suicides as well. And people also feel loneliness when they are into this deep state of mental disturbance. So in order to overcome this particular issue and also address the mental health, one of the important issues that we can look at for addressing the mental health is what is called as psychosocial support. So what is psychosocial support? This is basically addressing the mental health by counseling those people, educating them, providing them the spiritual support as well as the economic support and emotional support for all these people, so that they come out of this mental health imbalance. So the psychosocial support can be of two types. One is what is called as preventive approach. The other is what is called as the curative approach. So what is this preventive approach? So basically, when we are speaking about preventive approach, you are realizing that a person might enter into a turmoil of mental imbalance. So identifying it and providing all the due precautions and measures even before that particular person enters the phase of depression or suicidal tendencies is what is called as preventive approach. Then we have something called as the curative approach. What is this curative approach? Let's say for example the person is already in depression or he has committed an act of suicide but is escaped as well. So in all these cases, providing them the emotional support and making sure that they come out of this depression is what is called as the curative approach. So ensuring that mentally disturbed people are given this support is what is called as the psychosocial support. Why are we discussing all this? That is because of the COVID-19 issue. The minute COVID-19 issue came, there are couple of people across all age barriers, all age sections who have been affected by the mental health. Why? Because these are the people who were gregarious in their nature. They were going out. They were not actually restricted to their houses. But since COVID-19 hit, most of the people, they were stuck at their houses as well. And what exactly happened was the schools were also shut, colleges were also shut. These students were also going to schools and colleges, and now they are restricted within the four walls of their house. So what it means is that there is a change in their lifestyles which can also lead to mental imbalance. So what we have seen with this COVID-19 is that there are different set of people, different age groups who are all impacted because of emotional trauma and mental health imbalances. But one group or one age group that we have to look at is the children. Why? Because they are especially vulnerable to the adverse mental health conditions. That is because as adults, we would be able to overcome all these issues because we have experience behind us, but that is not the same when it comes to the children. Why? Because the children might be going to the schools, they might be in the colleges, and they might not be exposed to the vagaries of life as well. They might be moving a lot, they might be playing as well, they might have social friendship as well, and all of a sudden, just because the educational institutions were shut by the governments across the world, it is this group that might face the adversity and they might experience feeling of loneliness, depression and anxiety during the pandemic as well. The children might also lose their moorings and their thoughts also may get disoriented as well. So identifying them, playing with them and understanding them, providing them emotional support is what is this psychosocial support with respect to the children. We can take one of the examples that happened back in the year 1999. What exactly happened was in the state of Odisha. So there was a super cyclone in Odisha, and during this period children were the most traumatized. Why? Because they might have lost homes, they might have lost their family members, they might have lost their friends, and it is during this period they might require a lot of emotional support. So what was happening during this period? There were community volunteers who came up together, encourage students and children to come out of that particular feeling. So how did they do it? They asked the children to participate in various events like painting. They came out in open and they started playing the musical games as well, and they were also part of dance, drama and other competitions, storytelling, toy making, so on and so forth. So what these community volunteers did is engage the children so that they could actually move or divert their attention away from the cyclone to all these aspects that the children can engage in. So basically what we have to focus is on all these aspects of taking away children from the loneliness, from the depression and other issues towards engaging and participating them into what they usually like. So what are the concerns when it comes to the psychosocial support? When it comes to India, we do not have the basic health infrastructure that is required. So the need of the hour is to make sure that infrastructure is upgraded, and at the same time for the mental health we currently do not have the psychiatrists and the clinical psychologists as well. So whenever there is a mental trauma, it is these people who address their issue. But what are we seeing here is that the basic health infrastructure is not there, and the required number of psychiatrists and clinical psychologists are again not present in India. And as a result, the number of people required to provide the emotional support in India and world over as well is comparatively less. So what we require is number of people who will be engaged in such activity, and they are called as the community volunteers. So who are these community volunteers? They are not the trained psychologists, or they are not the trained psychiatrists as well. These are the volunteers who come forward to approach the people who are in need of a specific help. So what exactly happens here? These community volunteers are trained by the doctors, psychologists and psychiatrists, and these community volunteers approach the children or anyone who is in need of the emotional support. And apart from this, the World Health Organization has also spoken about talk therapy as well. So what is this talk therapy? This is one of the purposes where people tend to identify who is in need of talking. So when we feel lonely, we want someone to listen to all our traumas and all our distresses. So that is what is called as talk therapy. So when you burst out your anger, when you burst out your emotions, or when you say to another person, the tensions in life is comparatively reduced. Why? Because the other person is listening to you, and the other person might give an alternative directives as well, and you would also be able to come out of this trauma and distress. That is what is called as talk therapy, that which is also encouraged by the World Health Organization. So basically, recruiting the volunteers, making sure that they are trained properly, and they approaching the children and others who are in need of the emotional support is what is this psychosocial support is all about. It is this that we have to understand with respect to this article. Now let's look into the next article. This article says PM seeks respect for the territorial integrity. This article is in reference to the virtual meeting of all the leaders of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. Kindly remember, we will have an elaborate analysis with respect to SEO, as we will be having more updates and columns with respect to this particular issue. But as of now, let's have a bird eye view about this instance of what Prime Minister Narendra Modi has spoken about the virtual meeting. He speaks about the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor. What happens in this particular case? China is violating the territorial integrity of India and constructing a road project via the Pakistan occupied Kashmir, which is an integral part of India, illegally occupied by Pakistan. So India has made a vague reference that China has violated the territorial integrity and sovereignty of India in a vague reference to the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor. Further, Prime Minister Narendra Modi speaks about the United Nations Security Council as well. When we look at the United Nations Security Council, we have the 5 permanent members. You have the USA, you have the United Kingdom, France, Russia and China. But in this 21st century, there are a couple of countries who have also developed as well. They also require to be deserving, and they also have to be represented in the United Nations Security Council. So what India has also spoken is, it is asking for the support of the SCO members so that India also becomes the part of the United Nations Security Council permanent members. So when that particular issue is considered, it says that all the SCO members as countries will have to support the cause of India being a permanent member. In this particular meeting, Prime Minister Narendra Modi also spoke about India supporting the cause of peace, security and prosperity, and he also voiced his opposition to the terrorism, illegal arms smuggling, drugs and money laundering issues that which have been surfacing from the neighboring countries. So these are the general notes given by the Prime Minister Narendra Modi when it comes to the virtual meeting between all countries of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. But kindly remember, we will have more analysis going forward because we are expecting few editorials in the next couple of days. Now let's look into the next article. This article here is speaking about the 15th Finance Commission. A background to what this 15th Finance Commission is, what is its operations, what was the agenda given to it, what was the terms of references, what was the issues with respect to South India, has all been explained in one of our videos, and the link for the same will also be provided in our description box. Kindly remember, this 15th Finance Commission report is yet to be submitted to the parliament. The parliament, once it is submitted, there'll be an open discussion. Then this will also come in the public forum. Once we have it in the public forum, we will take up this article in an elaborate way. As of now, let's understand some of the basics with respect to the Finance Commission. When it comes to the Finance Commission, what does it do? There is a particular money that enters the Consolidated Fund of India. So from this Consolidated Fund of India, what amount should be retained by the center, what amount should be retained by the states will be given by the Financial Commission, which has a constitutional mandate. So we have something called as the vertical distribution, we have something called as the horizontal distribution. So what is this vertical distribution? This basically makes sure that there is a division of funds between the central government as well as the state government. Let's say hypothetically there is a collection or the revenue of about 1000 crores. Out of 1000 crores, what amount should go to the center and what amount should go to the states as a whole is what is called as the vertical distribution. Then there is something called as the horizontal distribution. So what is this horizontal distribution? Let's say out of 1000 crores, about 580 crores is taken by the central government, but there is about 420 crores which is given to the states. Among all the states, what should be the distribution between different states is what is called as the horizontal distribution. So the horizontal distribution will basically mean how much of the money will be going to Rajasthan, how much of the money will be going to Maharashtra, how much will go to Karnataka, how much will go to Kerala will be discussed under the horizontal distribution. So there is a prescribed cut, there is a prescribed rules, there are prescribed parameters that are taken into picture for this horizontal regulation or horizontal distribution. All this has also been discussed in our earlier videos as well, so kindly look into it. But what is another important aspect with reference to the 15th Finance Commission is that the government had also asked the 15th Finance Commission to look into whether there has to be a local government grant, whether there has to be a disaster management grant, whether there has to be a separate mechanism for the internal security as well as defense. So all these parameters will be discussed when this particular report is out in the public forum. And apart from that, they have currently given about 4 important reports. So what are these 4 reports? The first and the second report are the main 2 reports which speaks about the divisible pool, and we have the third report which speaks about how the central government will have to approach the money, and the fourth report or the fourth volume is focusing on the state governments and their finances as well. So kindly remember, all this discussion will be taken up going forward, but as of now, this is what you have to know in general. Now let's look into the next article. This article here is speaking about the peace deal between Armenia and Azerbaijan with reference to Nagorno-Karabakh region. So this is the Nagorno-Karabakh region. So in this particular region, there was a conflict between Armenia and Azerbaijan as to who should be owning this particular region. We have discussed couple of times in the very same platform what this issue is all about. But now what we are discussing is about the peace deal that has been established between these two countries, and this was brokered by Russia. So there was a peace deal that was signed between Russian President Vladimir Putin, Azerbaijani President as well as Armenian Prime Minister. What is this new peace deal all about? According to this peace deal, both the sides currently have positions. In all these areas that they currently hold, there will be ceasefire, there will be no military operations, and what we will also have is the Russian peacekeepers who will be present in this particular region. So what we will have is the Russian peacekeepers coming up and monitoring this particular region for about 5 years. And when it comes to refugees and internally displaced people, all those people who have moved away from this region, they can come back to this particular region, and in case there are prisoners of war, they will again have to be exchanged, is what this peace deal all about. It is this that we have to understand with reference to this article. Now let's look into some of the preliminary practice question. Lachin corridor forms the shortest route between, is it North Korea and South Korea, Russia and China, Tigray in Ethiopia and Eritrea, or Armenia and Nagorno-Karabakh? The answer to this is Armenia and Nagorno-Karabakh. Why have we taken this practice question? Because of the reference with respect to the peace deal. So kindly remember, we are speaking about the Lachin corridor. This is the shortest distance between Armenia and a place called as Stepanakert, which happens to be present in this Nagorno-Karabakh region. Now let's look into the next practice question. With reference to Enforcement Directorate, which of the following statements is or correct? It investigates the violations of Foreign Exchange Management Act laws. The Directorate draws officers from investigating agencies, the Customs and Central Excise, Income Tax only, as they deal with economic offences. So the correct answer to this is one only. Why? Because it is not only the income tax and customs, it draws also officers from the police service like the IPS as well. Why have we taken this practice question? Because of the reference given under this article. So kindly remember, the Directorate draws officers from customs, income tax and police as well. Now let's look into the next practice question. Consider the following statements. Homeopathy is a system of medicine born in Europe. Unani as an ancient form of traditional medicine originated in Tamil Nadu. Which of the above statements are correct? The answer to this is one only. Why? Because Unani as an ancient form of traditional medicine not originated in Tamil Nadu, but instead it came to India via the Arabs and Persians sometimes during the 8th century, and Siddha was originated in Tamil Nadu through the work of Siddhas or saints. Generally, the basic concepts of Siddha and Ayurveda are similar. Why have we taken this practice question? Because of the reference given under this article. Now let's look into the next practice question. Which of the following is the custodian of the Constitution of India? Is it the President of India, Prime Minister of India, Lok Sabha Secretariat or the Supreme Court of India? The answer to this is Supreme Court of India. Now let's look into the mains practice question. Today you guys will have to write two essays. The first essay is democracy cannot succeed unless those who express their choice are prepared to choose wisely. Why this topic? That is because of the elections that which is taking place in Bihar and by elections in Gujarat, Uttar Pradesh, Madhya Pradesh and Karnataka. The second essay says the focus of healthcare is increasingly getting skewed towards the haves of our society. So please write both these essays in our comment section, peer review and also come up with constructive criticism. So this is it for today. Thank you for watching. All the best.